Is it possible that Canada could be scrapping the mortgage stress test? Back in 2018, OSFI updated their B20 guidelines to enforce a stress test so that new mortgage borrowers would be required to qualify for mortgages at a higher rate than they were getting in their mortgage contract. And initially this was done so that in the event that mortgage rates rose dramatically, Canada could at least try to avoid some higher rates of delinquencies like we had seen a decade prior. I guess you could say that OSFI didn't have a whole lot of confidence that the Canadian government was going to be able to plan for a soft landing in the event that rates rose.
You thinking what I'm thinking, partner? Aim for the bushes.
The stress test, for all intents and purposes, did seem to work though. I mean, after all, you don't see a bunch of foreclosures and delinquencies happening in mass droves now that the interest rates have risen, at least not just yet. But even when the stress test was first implemented, there were some gaps in logic into how it was structured that now, fast forward years later, now that we're in this economic environment, could actually go on to make things worse, not better. Take, for instance, the fact that the stress test fails to consider the varying levels of risks for different types of mortgage products. For instance, is a mortgage that has a fixed payment and fixed interest rate for 10 years really the same risk as a variable rate mortgage where both the interest and payments change? No, obviously not. And yet, with the current structure of the stress test, the person who's going for the variable rate mortgage is actually going to qualify for around 20% more than the person who's going for that more stable 10-year fixed. Not only that, what's been happening more and more recently with new home buyers is that many of them are choosing to go with variable rate mortgage options. And in some cases, and this is particularly true with those buying closer to their pre-qualification limit, they're doing so because they wouldn't qualify for a fixed mortgage product. So essentially what we have now is a stress test that is pushing people into mortgages with fluctuating mortgage payments so that they can qualify for larger mortgages. I think most people should see a problem with that. Like I said, the original intent of the stress test was to hedge against rapidly rising rates. Well, we've already gone through an economic environment now where we've gone through rapidly rising rates. And now with all these recessionary pressures adding on, the Bank of Canada is going to think a whole lot harder about each additional rate hike from now on. This is one of the reasons why the Bank of England just removed their stress test from the equation. Their stress test was in effect a lot longer than ours and actually required you, at least initially, to qualify for a mortgage at least 3% higher than what you were getting in your contract. So while the Bank of Canada and OSFI hasn't officially declared that they're going to be going after the stress test or readjusting it just yet, given what's going on across the pond, they're almost undoubtedly actively considering it. Across the pond. That would have been a great time for a British accent if I could actually do one.